This is the Bold City Podcast.
Hey, welcome to the Bold City Podcast. I'm Jason Masters, the lead pastor at Bold City Church. Really quick, I want to remind you guys that you can find our podcast on literally any platform that you can find podcasts on. Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, find us there. And if you're not subscribing, I want to encourage you to subscribe. And if you like what you see or like what you hear, please hit the like button. And if you think anything's impactful and it could help impact someone else, we want to encourage you to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Well, today I have a really special guest. He's really special to me. I have my college football coach, John Auer, with me. What up, Coach Auer?
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Thanks for making the trek all the way down from Minnesota to Florida. What do you think of Florida?
I love it. It was a great week. We've been here for 6 days, and to come down here and spend some time. My wife and both daughters came down, and one's married, and her husband came, and then the other one has a boyfriend. He actually came down and hung out with us too, and it was a great week going to the ocean. We don't get an ocean up in Minnesota, and it was just becoming 70, 80 degrees back home, so this was a nice little change up for us.
Yeah, and you brought your sidekick with you, your grandson.
Yep.
Little Willie.
Brought him with and spent a day in the pool. It was the first time. It was pretty cool yesterday. He stuck his head in the pool and looked up at me and smiled while his face was under the water with his mouth wide open and his eyes wide open. So for a grandpa, that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so this is your second time being down here with us. Man, I am convinced you're a beach guy. Like I don't think God makes mistakes, so I don't know how he left you in Minnesota so long because you love the beach.
I do. I enjoy it. I like the waves. It was a little tough yesterday or the day before we went to Jacksonville Beach. They had the red flags out, and I'm a bigger fella, so I was a little worried that it was going to take me away. And so I told my wife, I said, if I start drifting off, just let me go. Don't come get me. And we'll be okay. But I'll enjoy my trip.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, this is a big deal for me to have you guys down here. First off, this podcast, I think, doesn't really even exist without your influence in my life. And so we're going to maybe talk a little bit about that story and talk some football. I think that'll be fun too. But a lot of people don't know this. I showed up really to your doorstep of your coaching office in desperation, trying to do something with my life. And didn't even know it until we got into fall camp where we had to do all the NCAA paperwork, that I was actually at a Christian school. And a lot of people who know you they know you as probably coach and a great influence on young guys, but you're also a strong encourager in the faith world for a lot of us. And you didn't over-preach to us, but you put us in phenomenal positions to grow and learn with God. But you also come from a pretty good faith background. I know your mom worked at a church. You guys helped plant a church in Minnesota and stuff back in the day. Could you maybe just tell us a little bit about your faith journey?
Sure. So, as a kid, I grew up in a church because my mom worked there. My dad was a huge faith guy. And so every summer I always went to Covenant Pines Bible Camp. I always remember that, going to. Didn't matter whether you had baseball or not, you were going to go to Bible camp for a week and spend at that. And so it's probably in about the fourth grade when I remember laying in my bunk and accepted the Lord as my personal Savior and knew what it was about then. But yet I think a lot of it stemmed from just being with my parents and being in that atmosphere where I kept going with that. That's just what we did, but it wasn't I didn't necessarily own it. I just felt like that's what we were supposed to do, even though I felt like he was moving with me at that camp and doing it. So it wasn't until later on, more so, I know you know about this, but in college I wasn't the greatest kid. I struggled with a lot of different things. And, for me it was a battle I'd go home and live that Christian life. But in college, there wasn't, I think I had 3 guys that were Christian guys on our team, and there's 128 guys. So there's 3 guys that I knew were Christian guys. So it was a battle for me and stuff while I was in college. But then I became, and this is kicking it through, but then I worked at St. Cloud State, And I watched an old coordinator who was a Christian guy who played at Colorado, was an old lineman at Colorado under, what's the guy? I can't think of his name. The old coach that started up the
Yes.
Promise Keepers.
Yep.
So I watched him, and I'm like, that guy can be a cool football coach, be a Christian, be a dad. And I watched him. I'm like, you can do this football thing. And so it was about then that I started living my life for the Lord. And I know I accepted him when I was in 4th grade, but I think there's a difference between that
Sure.
and when you start doing things and start making decisions based upon your faith and doing it. And so for me, that's what it was bringing that guy into my life. And he was the head coach at West Florida when they won the national championship. But that for me was a time of seeing a guy like that I looked at. I'm like, all right, I can do this. I can be a Christian. I can be a football coach and be tough on kids and work with kids. But for me, that guy, I needed that guy for me, and God brought him into my life for me to see him. So then I could see, okay, that's what I want to do. That's what, and we all need that. We all need people that we look at, that we see that they're like, all right, and he was a cool dude who was a football coach. And again,
Good football coach too.
Yep.
So it's really, for me, and this is a common theme with a lot of people, man, we get saved, man, we're like, man, our eternity's secure, but then somewhere something switches and maturity begins and we begin to take ownership of our faith. And so it sounds like that's what happened to you. And for you, it happened at St. Cloud State because, God provided an influence for you that it really just gave you an example where it's like, okay, I can do this. Yeah. And you actually went and did it too. So, which is why we're here now. And so you're at St. Cloud State. You see a man of God doing what you love to do, but yet still doing it, how I would say, unto the Lord. He's doing it for God, for the glory of God, and impacting men. So you're inspired because were you like maybe teeter-totting with, is this coaching thing for me or not?
Well, it's good you said it. When I was, I always grew up wanting to be a head high school coach and an adaptive PE teacher. So that when I was in college, that's what I wanted to do. And then when I was at St. Cloud finishing up, I walked into the coach's office and he said, spring they lost their O-line coach, left for Nebraska to be a GA, and he said, "Well, you want to help me out in the spring?" I'd only played defensive end. He goes, I need some help on the O-line. So I was like, all right, let's try it, and I did it. And before I had done an internship at a high school, and I was like, I don't know if this is really what I want to do. And then I went there, and this is where it comes back to, you got to listen to what God tells you in your life, because you might think you want to do this, but he might have something else for you to do. And for me, that's where I did that spring, and I was like, this is what I want to do. This is the age, because I look back on it, and I'm like, the age that I struggled the most was in college.
Yeah.
And I was like, this might be what God wants me to do, and use that to help other people, because I can relate to them more than I can relate, because I didn't get any trouble in high school at all, so I couldn't necessarily relate. But in college, I can relate to that. And so I can tell guys, hey, you know what, I struggled just like you struggle. And I'm not going to sit here and judge you by that. What we're going to do, we're going to work through it. And as long as you're willing to work at stuff, I'm willing to work with you through it.
I feel like we've had this conversation before.
Yeah. And that was my biggest thing was, there was many times where I'd go home from work and I'd say, you wouldn't believe what Jason Masters did today. And my wife would go, you do realize that you were 100 times worse than him when you were in college, right? So she'd kind of put it in perspective, and then I'd be like, okay, I gotta lighten up a little bit, because she's right. I was, and it ended up being okay because of it. But while I was at St. Cloud too, I wanted to be a Division II O coordinator. And my dad, who just passed away 3 weeks ago, my dad calls up and sees this online on a Christian website. And he's looking at it, and he's like, there's a head coaching job open at a D3 school. So my dad calls me up, and he goes, hey, what about this? I said, how long has it been open, Dad? He goes, about 3 months. There's no way it's still open. So I said, I told him, just forget about it. And he took it upon himself to call the AD. So all of a sudden, 2 days later, the AD calls me up. He goes, "Hey, would you ever come and do a phone interview do a phone interview?" So I did a phone interview. And they said, "Is there any way you come by in a couple of days and spend the day with us and do a full interview?" So while I'm there, I'm going in and out because understand there's a huge difference between St. Cloud State and Crown College as far as facilities, numbers, budgets, everything is just a huge difference. So while I'm there, I'm going in and out of, do I want to do this? Don't I want to do this? And I'm thinking, when I was at St. Cloud, I would be gone recruiting for 6 weeks around Christmas time, and I'd never see my kids. I'd see them for about 4 hours on a Sunday afternoon before I'd have to leave and drive to go to Wisconsin to recruit. And so I talked about it with Kristen a little bit, and we, it was like, okay, I can still have a family and coach football, and God's putting me in a Christian environment that was good for me.
Yeah.
It wasn't like this, the St. Cloud, he had left too.
Your influence at St. Cloud.
He had left, so I had lost that guy. So it's like, it's amazing to look back and see how God influences our life in different ways that we don't realize until we get done. And then we go back and go, okay, there's a reason why. I never even knew where Crown College was at. I never even heard of it.
Yeah, me either.
Before I went and interviewed there, and even after that, it took me a couple days to just be like, all right, hey, I gotta ball up and and go
take
and take
yeah.
this and do this, and it was the best decision that I had made because, like I said, I could still coach football. I was in a place where I was surrounded by men of God, and I could be a dad to my kids again.
Yeah. And do you feel like that was probably one of the bigger leaps of faith that you ever made, like stepping into that?
We still lived in St. Cloud for a year and a half because I wasn't positive that it was what I wanted to do. I still had that in the back of my head that I wanted to be a D2O coordinator. I still had, and so I drove, it was an hour away. So 3 nights a week, I'd stay at my parents' house in the cities, and 3 days a week, I'd drive home so I could do it. But it was still in that, okay, I'm not, and there was times throughout it where I would be like, God, tell me if this isn't what you want me to do, show me something, because there were some frustrating parts inside of it, and we didn't win a game until the second year, and bringing kids in and doing stuff, but it's tough to keep faith in it.
So do you think though, for how many years were you a head coach?
20.
20. Okay. So for 20 years of being a head coach, like, and being one at Crown, do you feel like that helped shape and build your faith as well?
Oh, no question about it. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, I take a look at it now, and we would, have Bible studies as a coaching staff and do things like that I grew the most out of. If you were to ask me in my 20 years of being a head coach, even the 5 at St. Cloud, and my top 3 things that I have, 2 of them are mission trips. That had nothing to do with football, and for me, those are ways of eye-opening and realizing that, okay, hey, I'm in the right place, so let's put everything we have into it.
Sure.
Yeah,
and you talked about commuting from St. Cloud. You still commuted pretty far even after that, from, was it Maple Grove?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you had a family up there, so you had some long drives, and then you got 2 daughters and anywhere from 60 to 100 sons every year. So you're a busy guy. I think it's cool though, like you take a step of faith into really a step back to facility and just from an athletic department stand. So it was a risk. I mean, it's kind of like church planning. There was an established program, but it wasn't well established. Let's just be honest. You really built that thing from the ground up. My thing I always say is like, dude, if the field ain't named after you soon, it's gonna bother me, because you built that field. The literal field, like I remember when we sat and talked and you recruited me, the field that they play on now, you showed it to me before it ever even existed, right? So I just look at like you taking a step of faith into something that was really risky, not very promising, not very glamorous, still came with its own pressure, There wasn't an overwhelming pressure probably at the beginning outside the pressure you put on yourself to be a winning program. They had never been a winning program. People don't know this. This is like going to be a history lesson on Crown football right here for them. Never been a winning season until actually my class, the first season was the first winning season. But you just grinded that thing out. You know, it wasn't some magical, mystical faith thing. It was practical steps, and God's grooming and growing you and impacting many people in the middle of that, which is incredible. What was the first year you were at Crown? Do you remember?
2001.
2001.
So 9/11
I was in jail then.
was my first. That's crazy. My first year, my second game was 9/11, and we were still deciding whether we were going to go play or not that week. We played actually in South Dakota, and we drove there, and I'm still figuring out how to. You know, I'd never done road trips before, so we stopped and ate on the way there, and it took them an hour and a half to fix us. And so we showed up 45 minutes before the game started, and it's pouring down rain, and we got to get everybody ready and everybody going.
Stretch out,
It is amazing how you learn things in time, but you learn to adapt as you go through it. And you were talking about through time, and it took that long to get to having a winning season. I thought coming into it, I've been at a D2 school. I'm going to be able to out X's and O everybody, and we're going to win games because we can outsmart people. And get into the first season, and we struggled a little on the O-line. Had a good running back and stuff like that, but it was just trying to figure out a way to give our guys a chance. Mm-hmm. And that to me that was fun. And I can't stand losing. Yeah. But to me, to find a way to give your guys who deserve a chance, to give them a chance to win a game, to me that was fun. And again, it was tough at times to go through that and see that. But if that's your goal is for other people, it's not about you as a coach. If that's what you're going into it about, hey, I want to be this, and I want to be on this, and I want to do this. Sure. If that's your goal, it's not. But if your goal is to change people's lives and to make their lives better, then you got to keep faith that it'll happen and keep working at it.
Yeah. And so, because you were part, like St. Cloud State was pretty successful. They were a pretty decent program when you were there, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're around 500, but we had beat, my third year there, we had beat North Dakota State, the opening game, 41-0. So we had some good, we had some times where we were good, and the old linemen that I coached were ridiculously good. Yeah. I mean, they were just, and smart too. So you go, there's your differences. You talk about going from St. Cloud to Crown and go into it. And at St. Cloud, you'd fill out this sheet of paper, and you'd have students there that would set up all your drills and the pads and everything you have. They did all the film stuff, and you'd have a tape in your box that would have all your third and long plays, third and short plays. So I came into Crown. I'm like, hey, where's the sheet of paper? Where's the kids that are going to set up? And one coach goes, Coach, you do realize that you got to set up your own drills. You got to do all of your own tape work stuff, and you got to do your own. So for me, it was an eye opener to see that.
Maybe I am a high school coach.
I was like looking around. I'm like, okay, so you're telling me there's nobody going to come out here and help us? You got to
build that.
You got to figure it out yourself, and you got to do those things. But to me, that was fun to figure those things out, and you knew you were working for those kids. I always told our coaches that you do realize that those kids are paying tuition, and they're paying for your kids to eat. They're paying for you to have a roof over your head. So we're not here. We're here for them. Yeah. They're not here for you. So let's make sure that we're giving everything we have to those kids.
Yeah, that's good. And dude, your whole coaching career is just a faith coaching career. It's a faith to do everything, it sounds like. So 01, then 07's your first winning season. So it was a long 6 years, right?
Yep, very long.
So I was there for the first winning season. Let's dive into that a little bit. Man, what did that? I could still see it. I remember being at Morris, and we just lit Minnesota Morris up, and it was done. It was confirmed. We without a doubt had a winning season. Man, do you remember that? What did that feel like?
Felt the best. I remember. I watched a Kevin Costner movie where he was a pitcher and he was throwing the perfect game, and the catcher comes out and he says to the says to Costner, he goes, you know what? He goes, look around. We don't suck anymore. So at the end of the game, that was exactly what I felt like. I felt like looking around and going, you know what? We don't suck anymore. And that was kind of a relief for the guys to know that, hey, we worked our way. And it was you and your group of guys, but the guys previously who had to battle through all that time of not being the greatest and trying to find a way to just compete to get into that point. But I think that's the biggest one. I remember standing there afterwards and having that feeling of, we don't suck anymore.
Yeah. And so for me, like showing up, like I've played on a lot of winning teams. Like, man, like winning was like everything for me. And then you step into a college program. And I remember that time at Minnesota Morrison thinking, like, this is cool, but I expect this. But I remember like Pro and some of the other guys who had been there. I remember how emotional you got, and I remember how emotional they got. There was like what I saw is what I saw. Is all I knew was what was right in front of me. But they had like years invested in that moment, and they knew how much you had invested. I don't even think I really understood. I understood a little bit in that moment. Like, this is obviously a big deal for Coach, because you got emotional talking to us after the game, but looking back now and knowing the whole story, maturing and growing, it's like, dude, I can't. What a move of faith to grind that out for 6 years, to see something in your mind, to believe for it, and to spend over 6 years of your life building for a moment like that, and then to see it happen. I'm like, that's incredible.
Sure.
I bet it was pretty draining and taxing.
Yeah, and I think part of it is just like you've got here in your church, where you start off with this and you work your, and I watched that too as a kid. My mom worked for our youth pastor, and he started up. I remember being at the bigger church, and the pastor is up front, and he's talking about how his dad was the pastor at the church, and how he's leaving. And so I see and everybody's crying because he's leaving, and he's a youth pastor, and he was like the greatest thing ever. I mean, everybody just looked up to this guy, and he left to go be at the church in Maple Grove, started up. And my mom had no emotion. I go, Mom, what's the deal? Why aren't you? She goes, we're going with him. And for me, that was to see, all right, hey, let's start something up here. And we had to set up chairs in the gym for 2 years straight. But
tell me more.
But it was like for me to see that was like that guy, and they built that up knowing that they had faith that it was going to become. And now there's a huge church that's where my wife and I got married, and and everything there from doing it. But it's got to start somewhere. It's got to start. Somebody's got to take it and say, all right, we're gonna do this thing, and not quit. In today's society, you've got, we were talking about earlier about the transfer portal. Today's society, we don't fight anymore. I was telling you, I started off as the 8th-string right defensive end in college, and never thought about leaving. Thought I want to become one. And whatever I got to do to move my way up there and work my way to do it, we're going to do it. There's no difference in that, in building a church or, starting a team. There's nothing else like that. You got to decide that it's what you want to do, and you're going to do it, and you're going to buy into what's going on and change other people into believing in you.
Yeah, and see, that's a good point. It makes a lot of sense now that you kind of got a legacy of from nothing to something. Your mom drug you right into a front row seat of it, and that's exactly what you did. Basically, Crown was, hey, we have this and we have this and a little bit of this. Just make what you can make of it, and you did, and and now it makes sense too, because I come out from under your covering, and here I am, 9 years of building a team to do this very same thing, to build something from the bottom up. And so I appreciate that about you. I think I learned a lot from you. So 2007, we get our first winning season. That was fun. That was a fun season. 2008, man, we jumped right back into it. 2009, and then I think after I left, playoffs are a conference championship area where we were playing Northwestern. Not a big Northwestern fan. I mean, I understand I'm pretty well removed. I was like, I don't really. I met somebody. It was probably last year. They were like, yeah, I went to Northwestern. I was like, Northwestern in Chicago or St. Paul? St. Paul. I was like, never mind. you know. But man, what was it like to start to build for something, see it start to happen, and then try to maintain a culture that was winning?
You know what was tough was the fact of when you get into starting to win, the other part we're building up to it, you enjoy the small gains that you get throughout. And then when you get there, there were some parts of me that I look back on and I wish I would have enjoyed it more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the year we were 7-3 and that type of thing. But it's like you get so competitive in doing things, you lose sight of what you enjoyed about it. And so for me, that was part of it was during that, and I loved it. I loved waking up on Saturday morning and knowing that it was either a 50-50 game or you were favored to win off of it. So you walked into it and you were excited about, hey, how can we how can we figure out a way to win and have success and being able to do that? And so we went through that time where I think we were 4 or 5 years where we had winning records, and then the next we lost a ton of guys after the 6-3, 7-3 year. And the next year, I think we had to replace 14 starters. And so we didn't win a game that whole year, the year after we were that.
Ooh.
And so that was tough. But like I said, honestly, that was one of my favorite years because we as a coaching staff were those kids were awesome. They worked their tails off in practice. There were never any problems in the dorms or anything. And so they motivated us to wanting to try to find a way to give those kids, even if it was just one win to do it. And we knew, I mean, we probably started 10 freshmen.
Oh,
and
wow.
so to go from this to that was tough. But for me, I think it was part of it was I was a little older. If that was me when I was younger, I'd have struggled really bad with it because coming off of being really good to where you struggled.
Yeah.
But being older, it was that way of trying to help them figure out, hey, you're still winners and you're still this and doing it. It's our job to help figure it out for you, and we'll get better again. But it's a process that we're going to have to go through again.
Oh yeah, you talk about making it fun. I remember. I mean, I didn't mind playing at home, but I really love like our road trips, man. You did a great job helping us see things a lot of us would probably never have seen in our life, exposing us to things. I think about the Lewis and Clark trip, and you getting us in the University of Washington, do our walkthroughs, and taking us to Pike's Market, and what would motivate you to do stuff like that for the guys?
Well, I think before that we had played St. John's the year they won the national championship for Division III, and I had, when I was in St. Cloud, I had known the old coordinator from there, and so he called me up and he goes, hey, they had a week off between the last game of the year and their playoff game, and he said, would you ever play us for that? And he goes, I'll give you a guarantee. And so I'm thinking, oh man, that's tough to put my kids into it. But they weren't an overly physical team. They were just unbelievably athletic. And so he said, we'll give you the gate receipt from it. And they get 15,000 people at their games.
Sure.
And so it helped us build another side of our press box, which helped us be able to do that. But I remember getting a call from the Star Tribune paper guy, and he said, why would you do this? I said, I want my kids to see what the top looks like. Play against the guy who's at the top. I want to see. I don't want to sit here and be down below and, hey, we're just kind of figuring things out here. Let's see what the top looks like. So we got to see what we have to do to get there.
Yeah, it's good.
And so for me, that was part of it was, I'd never want to be able to sit back and say, hey, you know what, we're pretty good in this. Let's try to get to the top. Let's figure out any way we can. And my other thing is, and this is part of us coming here this week, was I always tell my family, I'd rather have experiences with you than things. Mm-hmm. So for Christmas, I don't need things. I want to do something with you.
Yeah.
And so for things like Lewis and Clark, was I think Colorado College had dropped football. So I looked on the schedule to see who they had that week, and we had a bye week. So I called up Lewis and Clark, and I said, hey, you find a way to fly us there, put us in a hotel, and take care of everything. We'll come and play it. It was their homecoming. So they had a law school, and they ended up getting donations for it so they could still have a homecoming game. But to me, that was part of it. You remember that. That's what you want to give kids. Give them an experience. Give them something, whether it's mission trips that we go on or things like that. Give them something back. Probably a lot of the stuff that you remember aren't necessarily football games.
Right.
And it's more of the stuff outside, riding on a bus with 50 guys that stink and you can't use the bathroom and this and that and
Paid a toll, man.
And doing it. But that's part of the experiences you get in college. And the more you can give to kids, the more they'll then use. I guarantee you use a lot of those experiences when you're working with your own kids or working at your church.
Preaching,
doing
illustration.
All those things.
Yeah.
I think about those. That's what you want to create, is you want to create experiences for people so then they can use those for other people in their lives.
Yeah. Well, and I remember like you taking us to Seattle, like we fly, we had a blast, but I remember being there and just being like, man, I never think I'd ever come to this place. Like, this is crazy. And it was beautiful. It was a good time. But even like the long bus rides, like sometimes they're dreadful, especially if you had a bad game or if you're banged up or whatever. But I remember I used to love to sit up front by you and Coach Carr. I like to be able to see where I'm going, but like to hang out. But, man, that's where I feel like 8-hour bus rides, man, you really connect with people. And I think about that Lewis and Clark game. If we would have been able to get like 2 stops, we probably would have ruined their homecoming, which would have been awesome. But, yeah, I love that it was much more than just football to you. And, like, you took a kid from Florida, kids from Florida. There was multiple ones. In Georgia, you put us in the Pacific Northwest. I remember a couple guys being like, somebody, I don't remember who it was. They'd never flown until we went to Seattle. They'd never ever been on a plane. And to think that, man, you leverage football to provide opportunities like that for guys. It was incredible. What was the hardest part of being head coach?
Hardest part of being probably reaching. There was this vice president there. His name was Dr. Motes.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in my car and yelling at each other, and him yelling at me, going, "You can't save every kid," And sorry, to me that was the tough part, was giving up on a kid. That, and I always felt like if I felt like you were, sorry.
You all right?
I always felt like if you were given something, that was good. I wasn't going to give up on you.
Yeah.
And so for me, I mean, you guys might think of this from Jay. Honestly, you talk about your past and stuff like that. You weren't a ton of trouble, because I think you had decided in your head that, all right, I'm going to change this stuff around.
For sure.
And so for me, you weren't, you talk about it, everybody else thinks that, well, it changed you. I think you had decided beforehand, enough of this stuff before, I'm going to use this place to get better. And so for me, that was me. As long as I saw that out of you, as long as I saw, hey, I want to get better. It didn't mean you didn't make mistakes, because I guarantee you made mistakes and did stuff. But to me, that's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see you cared enough to try to do things right.
Yeah.
And so for me, I saw that in you, was that ability. And like I said, there's other kids that I saw, and he would say, again, you can't save every kid. Well, I want to try.
Yeah.
And if I reach a point where I felt like that kid, had given up on himself, okay, then it was tough to do. But we were going to at least try to get to that point. And there was very few kids that I wouldn't go to bat for. And I said, I'll give you one shot. You know what? I'll walk up there and I'll take the bullets for you, and we'll do it. But just don't do it again, because then it's on me. And for me, there's plenty of times where, we had to do that. go for kids. And I remember the first time I came here to watch, I'm like, that kid's preaching in front of a huge church. If you would have told me that when he walked through that door that he'd be doing that, probably wouldn't have believed you. But for me, that's where I get winning and losing games is cool, but watching people that, like you said, Prokash, guy's got 3 kids. He's a head wrestling coach and teaches at high school. You know what that kid was like when he was, for me to watch and see that, that's where the reward comes from.
Yeah.
Winning games is cool, but seeing people like yourself that now have a family and now, preach in a church and lead a church, to me, that's the ultimate reward.
Yeah, and you leverage football to help guys learn to win in life. So, and I really appreciate that. You talk about the hard stuff. I appreciate you making sure the world knows that I wasn't overly difficult. That I was, and I think you are right. My mind was made up. Like, hey, I think I showed up feeling like, hey, this is my last attempt to do something productive with my life. So I had to fight for it. But the one part that I struggled the most in was academics. Like I didn't understand how to study. I wasn't, like, that was not a strong thing for me. And dude, I'll never forget the hard conversation that you had with me, where you had a few very early on. Then I started kind of getting a little bit more. Then everything else was, I just upset you with football stuff, but that's not a big deal now. But I flunked my first semester. Like, I did terrible, and I didn't know how to ask for help because I was like, I'm not sure what I'm doing. And you got our grades, and I was back here for Christmas break, and I think I'd already predetermined. I was like, dude, I bombed. You're embarrassed. You're like, I don't want to admit this. I don't want to own it. Let's call it what it is. I was like, I might not go back. So you called me. You left a message. I was like, I'm not answering that. I was like, it's like I was scared to answer it. And so you waited a day or two. You called me back again. Hey, man, I got your grades. I need to talk to you. I didn't answer. I was like, I'm not calling back. You called back a third time. You left a voicemail. I'm not calling you back, is what you said. And I can still hear you saying it. You're like, you know what? You call me when you decide you want to be a man and you want to grow up. And, dude, I remember being like, man, I'm going to go back to Minnesota because I want to punch him in the face right now. I was, like, so upset. And I remember talking to my buddies who were up to no good here. I was like, dude, my coach called me out. And I was like, oh, my. And so they were listening to the voicemail, and they were like, sounds like a dude actually cares about you. And I remember when he said that, it's one of the Callahan boys that I travel and play flag football with. I was like, you know what? I should probably go back. One of Jarvis's mutual friends that Jarvis and I had. I said, I should probably go back. And so I came back, sat down and talked to you. And, dude, we just started coming up with a plan. Like, how are you going to win in the classroom? Because I wouldn't have been able to play the next year. And so I stayed up there all summer with you, too. And I did that for the next 3 years. I just like, I'm not leaving. I can't leave. If I leave, I'll screw this up. Actually, I remember it being like a big deal because of that phone call, because of your support. Like, I made one semester, like, it was not that next semester, but the third semester I was there, I made all A's and 1B. And I remember calling my grandparents and my parents, my grandparents cared, my parents like, whatever. But I was like, dude, I made all A's and 1B. I have not done that since second grade. Wow. Second grade. And I was pumped, and I was like, hey, where's the money at? Because back when you did that when you were a kid, they gave you money. I was like, where's the money at? And so, man, there's no way I would have ever made it past college without you not giving up. You were like, okay, this is it. I've tried 3 times. You haven't tried at all. Grow up and be a man, and that'll happen when you call me back. And so you called me to the carpet, and I'm very grateful for that. And we live in a generation where that's frowned upon now.
Yeah, I think about a lot of stuff about how, this is back to Coach Carr. I remember him saying sometimes, a kiss, a kick or a kiss, some of the time you need a little bit of each of those. And I always felt like that was the way that it needed to be, where, we could be tough. I always told coaches too, hey, we can be tough on them on the field, but when we walk back through that door, you better care about them. So what that means is you better go say, hey, let's go have lunch together after you just got all over them out on the practice field and doing stuff. And I think in today's society, we're missing that part of it. Sometimes there needs to be some toughness in there. Yeah. And there's got to be calling some kids out, and sometimes those kids need them. But you better come back and you better say, hey, the reason why I did that is I cared about you, and here's what we're going to do to make things right in doing it. I think, it's tough. Today's kid is tough it's different because they just want the kisses along the way, and with the kicks, a lot of times they look at those as being negative, or like in your case, you looked at that as being a positive. He'd stop calling me or this or that. Sometimes I need a kick, we all need that every once in a while. And then to know that person cares about you. I always felt like you could yell at kids and get on them all you want on the practice field. As long as they knew that you cared about them inside and away from football, they were totally fine with it. Mm-hmm. But if you didn't care about them outside of that, that's where a lot of times those kids would leave or quit or do this or that. And that's the combination I think you have to have.
Yeah. You did a great job with it. I remember a lot of walking off the fields with a hand on the back of my neck after you just roasted me in front of everybody because of something stupid I did on the field. And so I appreciate that because your kicks they always came with love. And I think that was probably the first big time I saw that after I bombed academically. And then we brought that thing back around because of your love. And just so everybody knows, you didn't pay for a tutor or anything for me.
No.
You just challenged me to step up to the plate. I had to come to your office and do a lot of work and stuff like that, stay all summer to do it. So I appreciate it. So thanks for not giving up on me or hundreds of guys, really. What was your best thing of being a head coach, your most favorite?
Well, I would say again, like what I explained to you was just seeing guys after they're done, when you look back and you say, look where they started and look where they're at right now.
Sure.
And there's tons of guys. You talk about your past and things. There's tons of guys that have that same past, and then you look at them now and they're making impacts in the world. And so for me, obviously the football part of it was probably the year you're talking about, where it was our first winning season, and doing that from a football perspective, that was my favorite because of knowing how far we had come and seeing the guys and knowing that the guys before you had laid the foundation, had done those things. But for me, it's the people. I just got a text today from a guy from Fort Lauderdale. His name is Keith Icon, and he always wants to be a 18-wheel truck driver. So everybody's like, why you want to college if that's what you want to be? And so, but that young man started off, and he comes from a tough home in a tough area and a really tough place to live. But to watch that guy come from where he started, and he had to figure out a way to pay for school and do all this and do all that. But to see him graduate this spring, and it took him 5 years to get it done, but he finished it and got it done. And then this morning he sent me a picture of he's doing his training in a truck place in Wisconsin. And he sent me his nameplate on there. And to know that kid, he started here, and so that was his way of saying, this is what I wanted to do all along, and because of what we did, now I'm here. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that was pretty cool to see. Just stuff like that. Just see, like I said, watching you preach and different guys like that. It's like that to me is the coolest part about coaching football, is to see guys change and see. Because now think of all the thousands of lives you impact in what you're doing. To me, that's my thing. Jason, I can't be a preacher. That's just not who I am. But I love the Lord. I love football. And so he put me in that position to do that. And that's where it comes back to, you can be, for you, that's what God wants you to be and who he wants you to be. But there's other guys that are in business or in education that, that's what, and again, it's just keeping your mind open to what God wants you to do. Because for me, that's what it came back to, was being in a Christian environment, but I still wanted to coach football, and I think that's part of it, is combining those things and keeping your eyes and ears open to what he wants.
That's good. I always say this, man, you don't have to be in vocational ministry to be in ministry. You just got to be a disciple that follows Jesus, because all of us are called to ministry. And so as much as you say, man, I can't be a preacher, you definitely have the fivefold calling of a pastor, of a shepherd, because that's what you do. You shepherd people and help counsel, guide, and get them to a place where God's called them to. And that's the beautiful thing too, is like, it's not one way. You've got hundreds of guys that are impacting people through their businesses, in their workplaces, teaching, preaching, pastoring, and hundreds of families that are being impacted because of seeds that you sown into guys. I told Tiff this before, when we came up for your celebration thing. I was like, dude, we're gonna have a blast because there's no chance that you're married to me. If I don't spend 3.5 years with this guy, there's not a chance you wouldn't put up with me. There's not a chance. So, and she loves you and she thanks God for you. My whole family does. Let me, as we get ready to wind this down, man, let's talk about your family, because somehow it's almost like you have a family over here, because if people have never played in college sports, they don't understand the time demand, especially on a head coach. And so you have your time demand with your family over here, with all your dudes and your support staff too, not just your players, but your other coaches, your trainers, and the people that help the program. And then you've got your wife and 2 girls. Man, how difficult was that to balance? And but also, like, man, tell us about some of the incredible things that God did in your family through that.
I would say the best way, because we all have jobs that we have certain times of the year where it's just like, it's tough because we're gone all the time, or we have this obligation for time and stuff like that. So I always felt like, was probably why I've never played golf, because I felt like in the summer was probably the best time for a coach to spend with his kids and with his family. And so for me, I needed to give everything I had towards that. And so there was times where my daughter would play the club softball, and I'd drive the 15-passenger van with 14 girls inside of it singing whatever songs they would sing. And for me, it was like, okay, I gotta suck it up and do this. But I loved it, I loved it, because I knew that was the time, because there was times where I couldn't, like my daughter's college volleyball career. I think I went to 4 matches her entire career. But whenever on the bus, I was watching her online, watching her play games and stuff like that. And so for me, I think that was the big part of it was, okay, when I am not at football, I need to be with them. And I need to do whatever I can to find a way to do things for them. And now it's with my grandson. My wife and I take care of our grandson 3 days a week. And for me, that's part of it, is just when you have time, devote it towards your family. And I sometimes it was tough to change my coaching to being a dad. I remember my oldest daughter came home from softball practice one time, and she was laying on the kitchen floor, and she was screaming because, oh, my legs are killing. He made us run 2.5 miles today. And I came back with, if you had run before that, you wouldn't be hurting right now. She looked at me and she goes, when are you going to be my dad and not my coach? So I walked out of the room and I walked back in and I go, all right, I'm your dad. If you'd have ran before you started up, you wouldn't be hurting right now. So she looks at me and I'm like, it's the same person. If I care about you as a coach, I care about you the same way as a dad. And that's the way I felt like as a coach was, I felt like if those were my sons, I had that one time with a dad, and I told him he wasn't playing the next year because he failed all of his classes. And I said, you're not playing until you get that. And dad calls me up and dad goes, so you kicked him out of the college, huh? I said, well, I don't have the power to do that. What I told him was that if I'm your dad, I don't want you paying this much money just to play football. You need to put it into school too. So if you want to say it that way, okay, maybe I did. But that's his choice to make on whether he wants to do it or not. But as a dad, I have to care about each one of those kids like they're my own, and I'd want you to make that same decision, if that was you in charge of this football team. So for me, there was times that were tough, but I always felt like I loved having 2 girls. Everybody always thinks, why didn't you have a boy? I got 60 to 100 boys every day, and I dealt with them. But at home, I liked having girls, and I enjoyed that.
Like you controlled that. Like,
Everybody always says that about a kid. When you're in there, and that's another thing too. If you watch your child be born, there's no way you can't believe in God.
Yeah.
When you watch that go on. And for me, I could care less whether it was a boy or a girl. I just wanted that kid to be healthy, you know? And then whatever from it, we got the same thing out of having 2 girls, and I loved having 2 girls and stuff like that. But that's, you know.
Dude, you got plenty of boy now with Willie.
Oh, yeah. I got. Yeah,
He's a tank.
I took him on. We went on recruiting trips all the way to Pittsburgh, and we drove for weeks on end. And they would stay in the hotel while I'd go out and visit with kids and stuff like that. And so whatever you have in your life, you figure out a way to include your family in it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of it is the more, and again, the times that you have away from your job, make sure that that's your family and not something else outside of it. Because I always told guys that when you were in your football season, your recreational or fun time was football. Because outside of it, it was schoolwork, growing in your faith and doing that stuff. But your fun time, so you couldn't have fun time and video game time and this and that. Football was your fun time. So realize that and set your priorities in that order.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right, well, let's land this plane. You want to pray us out, man?
I would love to.
I'd love to have you pray for anybody that listen to this. I hope they've been encouraged, man. I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful that God moved on your heart and moved you to Crown College, not only to meet me, but some of the greatest guys that I've ever had in my life have come through that your football program. So thank you for that, and maybe someone will listen to it.
There you go.
And so that would be awesome. But man, pray for us as we close it up.
Lord, we thank you for this time that we have together. I just thank you for what you've done in my life and my family's life, and moving into. Lead me in that direction of where I could have been lost and not seen your path, but you reached down and you led me to where you wanted me to be at. And I pray for all those guys that played for us and were in our program and what they're doing now with their families and everything they're doing in their lives. I thank you for knowing that you were a part of everything.
Yes.
You did everything in that to lead those guys in the directions. I pray for those guys that didn't make it all the way through, that somewhere down the road they'll see you and see your path in their lives and what you have for them. Again, we thank you for what you've done for us in every aspect of our lives, and just thank you for this time that I have with Jason, and thank you for what you did in his life, and thank you for the fact that you had to reach down and slap him upside the head and say, hey, follow me, and look what I'll give you. I'll give you these wonderful kids. I'll give you this wonderful church. I'll give you this wonderful life. But just follow in me. And I thank you for that. Thank you that we all have that ability to be able to follow you and change our lives. I ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bold City Podcast. To learn more about us, visit us at boldcity.church or download the Bold City Church app. To support this ministry and help us continue to reach people all around the world, visit boldcity.church/give.